Matthew Scullion decided to put off his gap year and his university aspirations and ventured into the world of entrepreneurialism at the tender age of 19. Following a roller coaster ride with a successful exit, he was hooked, and many years later wanted to do it all over again. And following some encouragement from his wife, Matthew was at it again, setting up Matillion, which is one of the fastest growing enterprise technology firms in the UK. We talk about Matthew's transition from consultancy into the software product world. We talk about the journey of growing Matillion, obviously. He brilliantly gives us some fantastic advice, especially for startup founders, and also his top tips on securing not only investment, but securing the right investors. There's so much value on offer here. And speaking of value, he talks about values a lot in the interview as well, in terms of like doing a good job, keeping promises, always think about your integrity, which I love that. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy doing it. It's Matthew Scullion. So Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Gareth, it's fabulous to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us.
So let's start off with a bang then. What does good leadership mean to you, Matthew?
Oh, what does good leadership mean to me? I hope I've discovered what it is. I'll start here. At Matillion, we live by our company values, 6 values. And the first of those is confidence without arrogance. And I think that might be a good attempt to sum up what good leadership means as well. I think you have to be vulnerable and caring. I think you have to learn really quick, but I also think you have to be confident in whatever it is that you're doing.
Sure.
And to some extent, strong as well. Leadership does mean leading.
Good stuff. Okay. Well, I'm really keen to dig in to your background. I know you ventured into entrepreneurialism at a very young age. But let me ask you this question. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I think I did, from a fairly young age, want to be in business. And why? I don't know really, Gareth. I just did. I mean, why do people want to be spacemen or pilots or doctors? It was just what floated my boat from a reasonably young age. In fact, I remember one of my favorite teachers at school, when the school photographs came round, for a bit of a joke, he stuck mine up on the blackboard and wrote CEO underneath. And that was at the age of about 14. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up, in business. And I didn't know much more than that, Gareth.
Yeah, no, it's a really good answer. I was a bit like that as well. I remember, do you know, like when I don't know if you were into computer games and Commodore 64 and stuff, but I'm sure my age a bit
An
now.
Amiga I had.
Oh, the Amiga.
Yeah.
I wanted one of them for ages, but my parents said it was too expensive, but there we go. Like, I always liked the games that were like Football Manager and things like that. And there was another game called Rockstar Ate My Hamster, whereby you manage a music band. And I just love the business element of that. You know what I mean? So I totally get that.
So 100% the same. The game I played was called Elite 2 Frontier. And on the one hand, it was a sort of space game, but really it was a trading game. And I used to avoid all the scary missions and just make money by trading stuff across the galaxy, Gareth. So a lot of similarities in our story.
Well, it's definitely in the blood then, Matthew. You co-founded and please correct me, but you co-founded your first startup at the age of 18, I believe, or was it 17?
Yeah, I think it might have been 17. I'd gotten a part-time job in an IT department of a local business through work experience. I went there on work experience and they said, would you like a job? Took the job. They gave me a laptop, learned to do a bit of programming, got sufficiently good that they started paying me £2.80 an hour, Gareth, to do a bit of coding for them over the summer holidays. And the guy that ran that IT department, who's still a good friend of mine, a guy called Neil, he said, hey, I'm going to set up a business. Would you like to come with me? And on paper, I should have been going off to do I was just finishing my A-levels, so I should have been going off to university, really, to do a degree. But I thought, well, lots of people take gap years, and maybe this could be my gap year. And if it all goes down in flames, then it was a useful way to spend in a year. And if it works out, then maybe I don't even need to go to university. So yeah, that's how I got involved with it. I think co-founders, right? I think I was probably the co-founder.
It's kind of like a shot to nothing, I suppose, isn't it? You know, in snooker, when you take a shot, and if it goes in, it's a bonus. And I suppose this was a bonus, but it did go in, didn't it, Matthew? You did really well out of this organization. Talk us through the formative years of and the period when you joined as a co-founder, right through to the point of exit.
Yeah, so at school, if I'm honest with you, Gareth, I was one of those people that would work hard on the given task if I enjoyed it. But if I didn't, I was probably maybe the guy that had to be ridden a bit to get him to hand his homework in. But as soon as I started doing anything with work, for whatever reason, I really enjoyed it. Always threw myself in it with kind of both feet and really worked hard. I was just lucky like that, really. Always enjoyed it. So I had this part-time job, and through that met a guy that was going to set up a software business and invited me to do it with him. He was the CEO or managing director, and I was the CTO or technical director. And it's pretty ridiculous when you think about it. I don't think he knew much about building businesses, and I certainly didn't. I was almost still in short trousers. But we picked a very good time to do it. It was the late 90s. So a lot of money was being spent in IT in general because of the Millennium bug, going back a little bit.
Like every
like every sort of IT shop, every software company, they were ripping out everything old and replacing it with new because they were all worried it was going to stop working on the 1st of January 2000. That drove massive investment into IT. And at the same time, it was just really the birth of the internet in terms of a big deal and companies starting to use it. So of course, those two tailwinds, perhaps the only thing we did right was pick that timing by good luck. But it was a services business. So we sold people's time, mine to start with. And then kind of as an evening and weekend project, I wrote a bit of software called Real Web. And it was an early web content management system. The idea being that a kind of end business user could fill out a form and it would create a web page or an update on the websites, which was quite a new thing back then. And we sold that a few times to a few, fairly glamorous companies. ICI was one of the customers I seem to remember, and Arriva, actually, the big travel company.
Sure.
This product won an award, and as part of the award, we got a booth at a big IBM convention. And at that convention, a company came over and said, "Who on earth are you guys?" And we're like, "Well, who on earth are you?" And we're this little crew from Manchester, UK. And a few weeks later, they bought that business. So it was quite a short run in terms of time. Kind of got going properly on it when I was about 18, sold it when I was about 21.
Wow.
And in that time, I think we maybe got to about 30 people and this little software product that I built and sold to a few people. So yeah, that was the story, Gareth.
What were the key things that you learned from that experience?
Maybe the biggest thing that I learned was about how it's all about the customer, really. Ultimately, your business isn't going to do anything unless it's making the lives of your customers better. At Matillion, my current company, we often say that the customer isn't the most important thing. And bear with me, because that would be a crazy thing to stop at saying. We say we only exist to make the lives of our customers better. But the most important thing is the team, because it's the team that does that. And I think I learned both of those things, or at least began to learn both of those things at that first gig at Real Information Systems was the name of the company. The team bit was important as well, because back then, if I'm honest with you, we had a lot to learn about how to find and train and enable and retain the world's best talent. We were a bit casual on that. So we had some brilliant people, but we did hit and miss a couple of times as well. And that's expensive, and it lets down your customer, particularly in a services business, right? That's what you're selling the people.
Absolutely.
And then on the sort of more prosaic end, I think I learned that I didn't know a lot. There was some stuff I was able to learn during that journey, but I also realized how much I didn't know. Finally, I started to learn a little bit about corporate finance, corporate development, shares and company law and buying and selling companies. And I did think to myself, next time I do this, I'll try and do a better job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So you got bought out, and then did you work for a bigger company then? Because you got acquired, essentially. So you were working as a small cog in a much bigger wheel. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, over quite a period of time. So that little company got bought by a huge company, an American company. But then, for reasons nothing to do with us and happening a long way away in a different continent, that company managed to get itself into trouble, and sadly, I believe went essentially went bankrupt, and so sold off a lot of the assets, including their European businesses, of which my little business had become a part of this bigger company's European businesses. And so that meant that for a few years, those European businesses got knocked together and ran as a standalone entity
Yeah.
of, say, 100 to 150 people. That company then got bought by another company. So it's a bit like your grandfather's axe, Gareth. I replaced the handle and my father replaced the head, but it's definitely my grandfather's axe. It was one of those. And so the final kind of incarnation was it got bought by a big European company. At the time, it was one of Europe's largest systems integrators. At that point, for the first time, really, I did become kind of a middle manager in a much larger business.
Yeah.
And I'd been incredibly lucky up to that point because I'd been a founder of a business so early. I'd stayed super senior in the businesses that had acquired us and bought and sold us and things. But now I was just that cog in the machine. And the first year I quite enjoyed it because they asked me to go and build this data analytics practice. And that turned out to be super useful later on in my career.
Yeah,
But
sure.
by the second year, I wasn't really enjoying it. And I guess realizing for the first time that for whatever reason, I just wasn't designed to work in the middle of a large corporate, or at least I wasn't at that point in my life.
Did you miss the startup, the sort of agility and dynamism of a startup and changing direction and pivoting? I know that's something you did later in your career.
There was three things. I'd always been saying to myself and anyone else that cared to listen that at some point I was going to set up a business again. Why? Well, because I enjoyed it, but also because I thought I had unfinished business. I thought, imagine doing anything at 17, 18 years old. You're probably not going to do as good a job as you would at 30 or 40 because you just know more about the world then.
Yeah, sure.
And I recognized that. And I thought, do you know what? I want to do that again and do it properly. I once did a long distance walk. It was an 80-kilometer walk, and I dropped out at 40 kilometers. And I was so, naffed off with myself for doing that, Gareth, that I've been back and done like 6 or 7 100-kilometer walks successfully since, just to try and get rid of that blot on the copybook. And I think it was the same thing. But the other two reasons were I kept having ideas that the business that I worked for didn't want to run with. And I can hear lots of current managers or business owners going, yeah, and I can imagine why they didn't want to run with them. And they may well have been right for their business, but that stifling of creativity is a problem. If you can set up a business that allows people to have creative ideas, run with them and take responsibility for them, then you've probably got a better chance of retaining them. And that wasn't totally the case at this other firm. This was a very good company, by the way, but there just wasn't room for that innovation that I was quite excited about. The last reason I'll say is that a phrase I was once taught is that people work 50% for the company and 50% for their manager. And in a big business, it's just more likely that your manager's a bit pedestrian, right? So,
Sure.
and ultimately it's her or him that you work for. And so I think I got caught between those tailwinds, just stuck in a mid-management role with a mid-manager above me as well, wanting to do some cool creative stuff and not having the room to do it. And then finally, this desire to do an entrepreneurial journey, which for whatever reason was strong with me, whether it was unfinished business or this thing I'd always wanted to get back to.
Before we go into that then, up until 2011, when you set up Matillion, okay, you had almost exclusively been involved in the consultancy space, services, yeah? What was the biggest shock to you coming from the services world and moving into software?
Well, I was keen to get away from services when I founded Matillion, but it's probably not quite as binary as it maybe looks from the outside. So first of all, if we go all the way back to that first gig, the one I co-founded when I was kind of 17, 18, that started off as services, but I built a product and then we sold the product. And so I guess that had opened my eyes to what that was like. In that first business, I just used my spare time to develop a piece of software. And that web content management system I mentioned before, and yeah, that was a product like we'd send you a DVD at the time, believe it or not, Gareth, with a label on it, and it
Oh,
had the
wow.
software installed. So it was proper software. Back then, I learned some lessons about building software products, like basic stuff like it's probably a good idea to ship some documentation with it and have a support website and stuff
Sure.
like that. But later on, I'd probably learned those lessons. My services run at my job prior to founding Matillion in 2011. The challenge with services is at the end of every order, you go back to zero. So you've got all this cost base sat there because you've got to pay people.
Sure.
And then you win a couple of orders for a couple of projects and they're all super busy, and then those projects finish and they're all on the bench again and you've got to sell it again. And if everything is novel and unique, those sales cycles are long and complicated, and it just feels like hard work. It's also a tremendous responsibility because you know that if you don't sell the deal, then those people ultimately aren't going to get paid, right? So
Mm.
it's quite a stressful way to earn your living, or that's what I found.
Yeah, sure.
And so back when I was working in services, I actually started to productize those services a little bit to try and make them easier and more repeatable to sell. We used to have a thing called on-ramp to WebSphere was one of them, and there was a
Oh,
on-ramp
yeah.
to Rational, and it was that you got the software, some training, some mentoring, and some ongoing support all in a bundle, and it worked really well. And salespeople could understand how to sell it, customers understood how to buy it, and it made it easier to sell services. And then when I founded Matillion in 2011, it was kind of to start with just another notch up that continuum. So this time we did develop some of our own IP. We also OEM'd some other people's commercial software. And we put a bit of services in, which you got charged for, but like in a productized way. But Matillion V1, in June of 2011, when we'd been up and running 5 or 6 months, you could look at it and say that was heavily productized services. And it wasn't until 2015 that we became a pure play software vendor where
Oh, right.
everything we sold was a copy of the binaries we'd created in house.
Sure. Do you want to just tell us about that period in your life then when you decided I'm going to go through all this again and take the entrepreneurial risk and go for it? I heard a brilliant story that your wife give you the actual final nudge. Is that true?
All my best decisions ultimately are rooted in Mrs. Scullion, Gareth. She's probably the real brains behind the machine, to be honest. But I've been talking for years about setting up a business. But yeah, we were on holiday one summer in Spain, and I think I was getting hassled quite a bit from the office, probably for valid reasons, but I wasn't really enjoying it. And I was saying that to my wife, and she said, "Well, gosh, why don't you go and set up your own business again? You've been talking about doing it for years. There's nothing really to hang on for apart from the lack of fear of not doing something. Like, why don't you go and do for it?" And that makes me make a bit of a joke, but like all the best jokes are anchored in truth, Gareth. If I ever write a book about how to be a CEO, the first chapter will be called Be Single or Marry Well, because it's very all encompassing.
Oh, yes.
And being single would allow you to be totally selfish about it. But if you do have a partner, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, they're going to need to be super duper supportive. And I was
Sure.
very lucky that that was the case. And so, yeah, we came back from that holiday and I cracked my personal PC open and wrote a business plan. I'd been working around data analytics, and I'd also been working around cloud technology for the couple of years prior. And I really liked those two areas. So I was like, yeah, I think there's going to be something in this data analytics in the cloud. And so I wrote a business plan to found a company at that intersection. And I went off and telephone called a couple of people that I used to work with. My former direct boss, who became a co-founder of Matillion, a gentleman called Peter McCord, and then two other colleagues. These were respectively the former chairman and chairwoman of the business that I'd been working at previously. Those three agreed to invest some seed funding in this idea, and that's what got us started.
Brilliant. Okay. I'm glad you said that because I wanted to ask you about raising capital. I know every company and every startup has to go through this journey. I've heard you talking about a trip to Silicon Valley and coming back on the plane a little bit deflated. But then obviously that started a sequence of events which led to, I think, your Series A raise. What advice do you give to founders right now, who are looking to raise capital for their idea, like maybe a seed raise or a Series A? What are the most important components and the key pieces of advice you give to founders on this topic?
The first thing I always say to people is think about what sorts of funding, if you need funding, before getting preoccupied with it. And the reason I say that is it sounds cool, venture capital. It sounds cool. And so my experience of people I've chatted to over the years is a lot of people get super preoccupied about it, maybe more so than like what they're actually trying to do in their business. And venture capital is just fuel, and it's fuel to do whatever your business is about. And not all business models need it. Some businesses might need a bit of initial investment. Some businesses might need funding quite a lot over time, like Matillion, the company I run. But the key thing you've got to think about is, does my business need funding or equity capital or something like that? Just one-off to get it started, or for a long time to fuel accelerated growth, or not? And then I guess as a byproduct of that, can it raise it as well? And that brings me to the second point. So Matillion is a software company, and we have a couple of criteria that mean we're the sort of company that raising venture capital both is possible and makes sense. And these are the key things, really. So first of all, you need a large total addressable market. You need enough addressable market to be able to build a decent sized business from. Secondly, you need scalable unit economics, really. So you need to be able to scale it up reasonably briskly, and venture capital can then be used to fuel that accelerated growth.
Sure.
And then finally, for whatever reason, and in the early stage, there doesn't need to be a huge reason, you just need to be able to describe it well. You need to have half a chance of taking a significant sliver of that large total addressable market. And maybe that's because you know the space really well, or because you're uber talented, or because you've made a bit of a start. Maybe you've built a prototype, some customers have started trying it out, saying nice things, even paying for it. Those would all be signals that you had a chance of taking a sliver of this large addressable market. Why do you need those things? Well, from an investor's point of view, they're investing to make a return. They're making a bet. And if the horse hasn't got a chance of finishing the race, or if the prize money is really small, then what's the point of making the bet, right?
Yeah, sure.
So they're going to be thinking about that before they think about anything else. And many businesses won't pass that test. And that is absolutely fine. Not all businesses need or want venture capital. And so that's my advice, really. Go and read about venture capital, figure out what works. If you've got a large total addressable market, scalable unit economics, and half a chance of winning it, great, then you're a venture backable business. But if you haven't, you're one of the 99 types of other business out there, and that's okay. The other piece of practical advice I'd give to people is, in general in business, perhaps in life, one of my phrases that I like to live by, Gareth, is outcomes are correlated to effort, right? Harder you try, luckier you get. And that's definitely true with raising capital. You put the effort in and you'll get the return. I can talk to the practicalities of that if you want, but that's generally my rule.
I absolutely understand that it's a bit of a numbers game, but what are we looking at here then, Matthew? How many pitches would you typically have to do to get a term sheet in your experience then?
So the rule of thumb I was taught and I live by, in an earlier stage round, 10 pitches to get one term sheet. Ideally, you want 3 term sheets. So the thing I've always advised people and tried to do myself is 30 pitches makes 3 term sheets and 10 for luck.
Just to be sure.
So 30 to 40 pitches. That, by the way, would be pitches to companies that are capable of writing a check into you. And so one thing that they seem not to teach at proto-entrepreneur school, they didn't teach it to me anyway, is to ask what sort of investor you're talking to as almost the very first question when you meet them. Investors invest in different types of companies, but also at different stages. But they will always want to hear your story. And so they might not mention to you that actually they only invest in companies at Series C and beyond, or $1 billion valuation or beyond, or their minimum check size is $100 million. So you want to be pitching 30 to 40 companies that are capable of writing a check into you. So if that was for seed funds, Series A funds. Now, if you can't find 30 or 40, I suppose you just do as many as you possibly can. But more's better, and do the ones whose money you want least first, because part of what you're doing is practicing, and it will help you refine your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And story is the key word, I think, isn't it? That's what investors want to see, is a believable story that they will get invested in.
Yeah, that's it.
You basically set out to do something. I know like companies like Slack famously did, set out to achieve with one strategy, and that they kind of moved into something else because they saw opportunity. I know the Matillion story is quite similar. You branched into the ETL middleware world off the back of seeing opportunity there. Can you talk us through how that came about and how you executed that?
100%. So Matillion was always designed to operate at the intersection of cloud and data analytics. And the reason for that is, I mentioned already, right? I'd been working in data analytics immediately prior to setting up Matillion, and I'd seen how hungry the world was for better, actionable data and insights in their business. And then I'd also been working with the cloud technology for the first time. AWS is what I'd started off working with, and was really bowled over by it, and thought, gosh, if we could do data analytics on the cloud, that'd be amazing. That's why we set Matillion up. And I've still got the old business plan knocking around somewhere, and it says, we're going to build a company at the intersection of cloud and data analytics. We're going to develop our own IP, and we're going to have a recurring revenue model. And all of those things are still true today in 2022. But exactly where we inserted ourselves in the market turned out not to be the business we would end up being. So to start with, what we thought we'd do is provide enterprise quality analytics, end-to-end working solutions to mid-sized businesses that we thought needed them, but that didn't have the time or the budget or the IT firepower to deliver it themselves. And that's what we thought we'd do. Right. And that is what we did for the first few years. Sure. And it kind of went okay. I probably wouldn't decide to do that now, because what I later recognized was that it's quite a hard market. Mid-sized businesses, the budgets are that little bit tighter, perhaps. Decisions harder to come by. Not actually that many of them in the UK, and we were selling domestically at that point as well. So now I would say, do I have a large total addressable market and a chance of conquering a part of it, and conclude with that market segmentation? No, and I'd look somewhere else. But that's what we set off doing at Matillion. Yeah, we did make some good progress, and I think we probably won over the first few years, let's say 50 customers, something like that. For each of them, we had to build what's called a data warehouse. A data warehouse is a database where you suck all the data from your production systems that you use to run your business, and you put it in the data warehouse. And as you do so, you join all that data together and change the shape and size of it to make it useful for analytics. Sure. And we had to do that for every customer we won. So we did it 50 times, and we did it in the cloud when that was a new thing to do. Like today, everyone's building data warehouses in the cloud, many of them using our software. But back then, it was quite a new thing to do. And basically, what we noticed is that it was quite hard work doing it. We wanted to be able to do it more productively. We knew what to do, we knew how to do it, but the technology available, like the tools basically, just weren't that good. Yeah. And to be honest with you, Gareth, to start with, we went out and tried to buy a better tool, but we found no one made one.
Was it sort of like Informatica, Talend, those type of companies? Yeah, Ab Initio.
100%. So those were really the inspiration, the forefathers of what we ended up doing. We liked those products. We were using Talend at the time, and interestingly enough, the guy that ran product for Talend now runs product for Matillion. So wow, nice. Okay. Talend was a visual low-code, no-code ETL tool, but not at that time built for the cloud. And we wanted something that was kind of like that, but a bit more modern and built for this new generation of cloud technology. So we built it for ourselves to make us get better at doing the thing we were doing, which was delivering analytics solutions to mid-sized UK-based companies. And that took us about a year to build this tool for our own use. That tool being all about improving our own productivity.
Yeah, sure.
And at the beginning of 2015, it was ready and we tried it out. And by golly, did it improve our productivity, right? It was just miles better. And thankfully, we thought to ourselves at that moment, gosh, I wonder if anyone else in the world could benefit from this product that we've developed. And that was what kicked off the pivot, really. And we thought
Yeah.
there might be a bigger market for this thing that we've built than there was for what we were doing originally.
You clearly got business acumen, Matthew, but how technical are you? Are you a coder? Do you do it yourself? Because, this product obviously had to come from somewhere. I'm assuming you were driving the product development.
I can tell you two things. Was I an engineer once upon a time? Yes. Would I get a job in my own engineering team? Absolutely not. So I was a pretty kind of high level engineer. I was never going to get a job at Google, Facebook, or in fact Matillion. But I do understand software and I understand what customers need. What I do understand is managing software development teams, because that's what I've been doing my whole career.
Yeah.
But it wasn't me that came up with the kernel of the idea for Matillion ETL. It was my team. My co-founder, Ed Thompson, a gentleman that worked for us at the time and still does, called David Langton, and a couple of other people knocking things backwards and forwards in the office. And I think perhaps the takeaway from that is, if you ask me why I left that career and started up Matillion again and what I didn't like about it, it's about creative freedom. It's about being able to have ideas and have them listened to.
Yeah.
And sometimes those ideas just aren't going to suit the needs of the business, and business will have to say no. But sometimes they are. And in this case, internally, we kind of came up with this idea and we said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's take a risk on that. Let's build it for our own use. And then later, when we realized it worked so well, we thought, gosh, let's see if other people want to buy it. So a lot of that is actually to do with culture rather than engineering chops, for me at least.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's talk about Manchester. You're a proud Mancunian. Were you a City fan, a United fan, or neither? Liverpool fan?
Golly, no. I was a Manchester United fan when I was a kid. My two daughters have turned out to be City fans, and that mildly irks me. So I guess I'm a lapsed Man U fan.
Right. Fair enough. Well, we had Naomi Timpley on before, and she was telling us about Manchester as a great place. I know you know Naomi.
Yeah.
And Naomi was telling us how Manchester's got such an exciting future, such a great place to start and build a tech company. I understand that apparently software was invented in Manchester University by all accounts. That's
if you tell the story right, yeah.
I haven't fact checked. Don't fact check me on that, but that's what I heard anyway.
No, it's true. The world's first store program computer, which was called the Manchester Baby, was developed at Manchester University, and so by about a week, I think, it was the first thing to store a program. It did it on a cathode ray tube, so you know how TVs used to refresh.
Yeah, sure.
That's how it held stuff in memory.
Really?
And so you can, with authenticity, say that software was born in Manchester, although it pretty quickly skipped over to Silicon Valley, I think.
The birthplace of software, for sure. So what I know you guys are very proud of your Mancunian roots. You've stayed in Manchester. What's your forecast on Manchester as a tech hub for the UK?
I'm definitely long on Manchester. It's got, I'm long on the UK.
Sure.
And actually, even though I am proudly Mancunian, I'm not sort of jingoistic about that. I think this can apply to many places in the UK and the UK as a whole. Manchester has got a lot going for it. I mean, one of the biggest things is grassroots engineering talent. They sometimes say in software companies that you've got quota-carrying sales reps and engineers, and everybody else is just there to support those two types of people, because it's the quota-carrying sales reps that sell and it's the engineers that build the products to sell. Yeah. All the other people are super important, but those two groups of people are definitely incredibly important to a software company. And Manchester has 3 universities manufacturing grassroots engineering talent, from the kind of commercial ready engineers and computer science graduates coming out of Salford University, where my co-founder went, Manchester Met University, and then also Manchester University, which is still an academic centre of excellence for STEM and computer science and high-end engineering skills. So there's a bunch of technology companies based in Manchester. Actually, I think the City Council do a good job at building a nice city and providing infrastructure and connectivity. There's an airport, broadband works pretty well. Not to be overlooked, we all speak English, and that's the biggest global market. So the nice thing about software is that you sell it internationally, right? Over 90% of our revenue comes from outside of the UK. So speaking English is a good advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I don't like is declaring victory too early. So sometimes, and for understandable reasons, people celebrate like how amazing Manchester, or in fact the UK, is already. Well, we're ahead of where we were. We're ahead of many other cities, but we're also behind other places in the world. And where you start to think, oh no, I can't get this in Manchester, is the experience from later stage companies, particularly in the things only later stage companies do. So I don't know, let's say you're building a software as a service platform that needs to scale to 1 million concurrent users. Not many people have had to do that in Manchester, so not many people know how to do it. Let's say you need a world-class product marketer to describe your software's value proposition in a way that will resonate with the market. Well, there's not been many enterprise software companies in Manchester, so you can't hire one of those there.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's a balance between opportunity and also realizing that we're not quite there yet. So to keep our foot on the gas, which goes back to right where we started today, right? Confidence. Can we do it? Yeah. Arrogance, have we done it already? I think there's still work to do.
Good answer. Brilliant. You're a technologist at heart, an entrepreneur. You must look at the macro situation globally in terms of tech innovation. And I'm sure certain things excite you, whether they're blockchain, AI, IoT, whatever. But what really gets you going? What makes you excited at the moment in terms of innovation and evolution of technology globally?
Lots gets me excited. And often those questions center on the thing at the real vanguard, the thing that we're not sure yet whether it's going to bite or not. What really gets me excited is when things do start to bite and do start to change the world and become something that almost everybody is doing. And the area that my business focuses on in data is a good example of that at a macro level, not just what we're doing, but what the market's doing. So, in short, every business has always wanted to make better, more informed, more data-led decisions. But pre-cloud, you could do that. The fundamental computer science hasn't really changed, but doing it was really expensive and really time-consuming. And so you could only instrument your business, put telemetry in place, look at analytics in real time or even just reasonably up to date in the most important and valuable of situations, because it was such a heavy lift getting that analytical telemetry in place. And then what the cloud does is it gives you that same capability at the click of a mouse. The entry of your Amex card details, although often nowadays these cloud spends are really big, so you have commercial relationships with the vendors. But what it's done is it's created this latent capability to make every aspect of how we work, live, and play better with data. And that can be prosaic kind of analytics, dashboards and charts and graphs and reports. But it can also be AI, machine learning, and data science to start predictively working things out with data. This huge capability that the cloud has provided has kind of, created that opportunity. So the thing that gets me really excited is before any of that comes true, data has to be made useful.
Yeah.
Data is a bit like iron ore insofar as there's lots of it and it's valuable, but it's not useful in its raw state. And we can refine it by hand. But if you imagine that almost limitless demand for insight, limitless demand to make every aspect of how we work, live, and play better with data, there's great underlying capability to do that with the cloud and with cloud data platforms like Snowflake and Redshift and Databricks. But this need to make the data useful before you can do any of that, that creates a massive space in the market for what we call data productivity software. And that's what I'm excited about, because that's the area that we work in, right? Matillion is the data productivity cloud that gives people services to make data useful almost at the speed of thought. So I'm really excited about that. And it's not something that's a long way on the horizon. It's something that's happening now and everywhere and at extreme speed. but that is otherwise constrained without technology like we're working on.
I love that analogy, or would you call it an analogy of the iron ore thing, by the way? And that we don't really think about that too much, do we? We don't realize, and that's what ETL is, I suppose, is that the raw data in its raw state doesn't really give you too much. It's when you turn that into really valuable information, I suppose. That's where the magic happens. Where we can predict the future with that, really, can't we? Because
literally, yeah, like literally. But as consumers of data, we always think about it in its finished state because that's how we see it. We think about the dashboard or the score that's been given by the AI algorithm. Or the report that's been emailed to us or we're looking at on our phone. We think about it in that finished state. But 70% of the work to get that dashboard, that score, or that report to you, 70% is the making the data useful bit, the refining of ore into steel. And practically what that means in terms of data is it's joining stuff together from different systems, making sure it's right, the data quality. Of course, in today's world, the privacy and security of that data. So you don't want to be accidentally putting people's credit card details or birthdays on a report that's going to be distributed to loads of people. Embellishing calculations onto it. So you can do the calculation once in the middle and then everyone else uses it and everyone's singing from the same version of the truth. That can be done by hand, but that's not very productive. But it's got to be done. And it's 70% of the work involved in a finished data use case to get that data useful. And so that's what we do. Matillion is the data productivity cloud, and it makes organizations, teams, and individuals drastically more productive in terms of making their data useful.
Looking back at your career now, Matthew, I know you're not done yet. I'm sure there's a lot of bright times ahead. But what career advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? It's a bit of a strange one because you did so much by the time you were 21.
Well, going back on it, there's a couple of things when I was 21 that I think I did, and I'm glad I did. One of those was never spend your integrity. Like Matillion got started because 3 former business colleagues of mine decided to fund me, in effect. And that, I hope, was at least in part because I'd never spent my integrity with those people. Even today, occasionally I'll bump into a customer or a partner from back in that first arc of my career. And there's a bit of you cringing because you're thinking, gosh, I was only 20 when I last met this person. What are they going to think of me? But in general, they've got reasonably warm memories. And I think that's because, I always just tried to be a good person and do your best to keep your word and play cricket with a straight bat, to be honest, Gareth. So that's something I did, and I'll go back to myself and I'd say, keep doing that. The other thing I'd say, and if you'll give me the liberty of changing the rules, when I'd most say this is on the day I set up Matillion, but I could have said it when I was 21 and then just waited. But what I'd say to myself is, assume you're going to make a big dent in the universe and act accordingly. Because if you do that, it drives all your other behaviors, right? It drives the urgency and the drive. It drives the cognition that time is your biggest enemy. I mean, gosh, I'm 43 now, and you realize how little of it we have.
Yeah.
And it just flies by. And particularly here in the UK, I feel, Gareth, we're just too modest in our ambitions sometimes.
Yeah.
And it means we create moderate outcomes, right? As you would. If you have moderate ambitions, you create moderate outcomes. But if you act like you're going to make a dent in the universe bigger than yourself, then everything else kind of cascades off that. You learn as fast as you can, you move as fast as you can, you put all the effort in, you're paranoid about time the whole time. And you may go down in a ball of flames, but if we all do that, then some of the ideas and businesses built will become more consequential. It took me a while to learn that, and I'm really excited now that I think I have. And maybe if I told it myself when I was 21, I'd have got on with it a bit sooner.
That's brilliant advice. I think it is a strange one, isn't it, Matthew? I mean, in the UK, we do tend to be a little bit less ambitious maybe than some other, like I know Americans, for example, they tend to be completely okay with failure and, going again and pulling your sleeves up. So let's finish on this one then, Matthew. I'm not sure if you're much of a reader, but if you're not, maybe you can recommend something equivalent or another piece of content. But any books, any pieces of content which have been very impactful or transformative even for you in your sort of business technology career?
Maybe the most useful book, and almost every team member at Matillion reads this book as they join. It's Patrick Lencioni, Five Dysfunctions of the Team. Yeah, it's about organizational health, right? In my opinion, the most important thing in any company is the team. And there's
Yeah.
only two types of problems in business: people problems and problems that you haven't yet figured out are people problems. So if you believe those two things, the most important thing is the team and all the problems are people problems, then it makes sense to gravitate towards getting that team into a great shape. And this doesn't have to be a business, by the way. It could be a sports team, it could be a military unit, it could be a charity, it could be a government organization, whatever. They're all powered by people. And so, Five Dysfunctions of the Team is a framework for organizational health. It's about high performance teams. And we we all read the book, and then there's actually a consulting company that owned by the guy that wrote the book that you can get in to help you with it. Although you'll get 70 or 80% of it just by reading it. But if you've not read that, that would be first on my list. I will also just finally say, Gareth, it's a very easy read. Most business books have 3 or 4 things in them that are super useful, and then lots of padding because the author was told to make it look like a proper book.
Right.
But Five Dysfunctions is written like a novel, and you can bang it out on a plane flight or a long train journey. It's a rollicking yarn, and it'll change your life as regards leadership.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds amazing. I read a book like that before called The Phoenix Project, which is a fictional company going through the sort of transformation around DevOps. So maybe it was quite similar to that. But we'll put that in the show notes, along with how can people find you? What platforms are you active on, Matthew?
All the normal social media platforms for a man in his 40s. So LinkedIn and Twitter. And you can find out all about Matillion and our data productivity cloud at matillion.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Matthew.
Gareth, really appreciate it. Great to be here. Thank you.
So doing the key takeaways for this episode felt almost impossible, as the whole episode could qualify as a key takeaway or a highlight. But if I am going to pick 2 things which I think would be really useful for most people, I'd have to start with the emphasis on being true to your values. It sounds a bit fluffy, but when you really boil everything down, if you stick to a good set of values and principles, then it pretty much moderates everything that you do. I mean, you have to be obviously strict with it, and you have to really instill it in your organization, which clearly Matthew has done. In terms of, do just little things like doing a good job, keeping promises, do what you say what you do type thing, and putting integrity at the heart of everything that you do. I think, it's something that's probably forgotten by founders a lot of the time, but I think it's something that's clearly served Matillion really well. The other thing that stood out was Matthew's emphasis on time. He actually said, time is the biggest enemy of growth. And although there's lots of ways of looking at that, I suppose, but it does sound obvious. But I'm sure many people wouldn't really look at it like that. And I think if you do, it may shape the way you think. I think, in relation to things like raising capital. I mean, raising capital, it just enables you to move quicker and execute your growth strategy to capture market share. But I think just basically putting the egg timer on the minute you get the investment, I think, and just really managing the time effectively, I think is something that companies maybe don't do so well, and clearly is something that Matthew has not only been cognizant of, but has actually managed time very well, which obviously is one of the reasons for this spectacular growth over the last couple of years. There was so much more to unpack. It was a brilliant interview. I really enjoyed chatting with Matthew. I hope you enjoyed it too. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for downloading this episode. We really love doing this show and are absolutely humbled by all of the incredible people who download and listen, plus the incredible guests who take the time to come on and share their secrets and experiences with our listeners. please can I ask that you take a couple of seconds to subscribe or follow the show. This small action means a lot to us and helps us greatly. Thank you. As you quite possibly have heard me mentioning in the past, we record the mass majority of our episodes at an amazing studio facility here in Cardiff at Tramshed Tech. Tramshed Tech is a collaborative community of entrepreneurs and scaling businesses geared towards supporting growth in tech, digital and creative industries across an ever-increasing collection of locations and partner locations, UK-wide and internationally. It really is the perfect place for your business to start up, scale up, accelerate or innovate. Head over to tramshedtech.co.uk or just search Tramshed Tech on your favourite social media platforms.